Hello, Rivka Willick and friends. So your challenge is a story about isolation. Here I am on the Shawangunk Ridge Trail. I've been hiking 2 hours. I haven't passed one person. This is isolation, and I love it. But I have a story about two people who live isolated lives in a different way. And the story comes to me from the incredibly talented and prolific writer Jane Yolen in her book of World Folktales. Now the story isn't, you won't find that story in the index of stories, it's in her introduction. And her footnote states that she got the story simply from the punchline of a story or a joke or an anecdote that was told by storyteller Carol Birch. And she also states in that footnote that every attempt she's made to trace the origins of this tale have failed. So here's my version of the story, The Old Woman in the Cave. There once was a young man who was very lonely and alone, even though he lived in the midst of many, many people. For you see, he was searching for something. He was looking, searching for honesty, for truth. For he knew when he found honesty, when he found truth, he would find beauty and he would find contentment. But no matter where he looked, he couldn't find it. He looked in his community, he looked at in his workplace, wasn't satisfied. So he made a decision. I'll sell all my personal belongings. I'll make this my life's quest. And that's what he did. He sold everything and began to travel from village to village, town to town, city to city, state to state. Finally, he went abroad from country to country, and he still could not find honesty, truth. He was ready to give up when someone told him of a sage. There is an old woman who lives on the top of a mountain, and she speaks only the truth, honesty. And she's very knowledgeable, very wise. Well, when the young man heard that, he got directions, and he immediately traveled to that place. He found the mountain, and he began trekking up to the top of the mountain. And he came to a ledge, a kind of a plateau, and there on the face of the mountain was an opening. Well, the man peered in. Hello, hello, and he heard his echoing voice come back to him. He took a step in, and when his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw a small fire on the floor of this cave, and sitting cross-legged next to the fire was an old woman. She was barely more than a skeleton, her flesh just hanging from her bones. She had just a few wisps of silvery white hair sticking from her almost bald skull. She turned to the man and smiled, showing a few crooked teeth. But her eyes burned like fire. And then she spoke. The man listened and heard her words and asked if he could sit down, and she consented. And he listened to the woman speak, and he was filled with wonder and warmth, for this woman spoke nothing but honesty and truth and wisdom. And then he asked her, "Please, would you take me as a student? I will help you. I'll build your fire and cook for you. I'll tend to whatever needs you have if you would just teach me." Well, the old woman, who was used to living by herself in isolation, she thought about it, contemplated, and then nodded her consent. Oh, the young man was thrilled. And he lived with the old woman, and he did tend to her and cooked for her, took care of her fire, and every day he would listen to her and learn. And the woman spoke nothing but wisdom and honesty and truth. Well, after 1 full year, the young man approached his teacher. I have something to ask of you. I hope you'll agree. I have learned so much, and I would like to go out into the world and tell the people everything I have learned. Do I have your permission? And the old woman, she gave it some thought, and then smiled and nodded her consent. Oh, and the young man was happy. Thank you, teacher, thank you. Now, when I go out, tell me, when I talk to the people, is there anything you want me to tell them about you? And the old woman, she thought, and she thought, and she thought, and then she smiled and said, yes, yes, make sure when you speak to these people that you tell them that I am young and beautiful. For those of you who, like I, am searching for the truth, for honesty, I wish you much luck.